One morning, back in the mid-80s, I stood in front of a classroom with 20 young military recruits. In the army, a morning is something that takes place shortly after midnight. So my soldiers would rather be sleeping than listening to me. I would be lying if I said they were trembling from excitement of learning something new today. And my task was to teach them how to use an auto-injector. An auto-injector is something every soldier in Sweden had in their equipment during the Cold War. If you were exposed to nerve gas, you had a few minutes to dig it out from your uniform, remove the safety clip, put it against your leg, and then push the back end of the injector. This released a long, fat, spring-loaded needle that injected an antidote into your leg. While I was explaining how the injector worked, I also demonstrated on a real device how to handle it. Like this one. This is actually the same device I used 34 years ago. But when I came to the final step, I didn't hold it against my leg. Instead, I pointed towards the class, aimed a little bit above their heads, and then pulled the trigger. Like now, the liquid sprayed above the heads of everyone. It was a smaller room, so it hit the back wall in the room. And if focus wasn't at 100% when I started, I now had 20 young men staring at me, holding their breath. But without paying any attention to what just happened, or to the wet girl in the audience, I just continued saying, now it's time for you to try. You each have an auto-injector in front of you. Pick it up and hold it against your leg. If you listen carefully and follow my instructions, no one will get hurt. The injectors I handed out were dummies without needles, but I didn't tell them that yet. So needless to say, at this point I had gained their full attention. And the rest of the lesson was a walk in the park without anyone falling asleep. Do you like needles? No, most people don't. Especially not the sensation of surprise of having one inserted in your body by mistake because you didn't pay attention. Now, using needles and threats of physical injury might be effective for increasing motivation, but it's hardly a good idea if you want to keep your job and stay out of prison. Unless you're training fakirs, of course. So today I would like to discuss some other approaches on how to increase motivation. When we talk about motivation connected to learning, we normally refer to what people desire, what they choose to do, and what they commit to do. Motivation explains what goals people choose to pursue and how actively or intensely they pursue them. Now, I'm a bit curious when it comes to learning and motivation. You've seen it before. So bring up your phones and give me your phones. Your thoughts about motivation. You go to mentor.com and enter the code at the top of the page. You just enter a word, press submit. Yes, yeah, the first one. Who's the next one? Just keep them coming. You can submit several words if you like. Yeah, I like that one. Interesting. So just give me 10 minutes to rewrite my presentation now. No, just kidding. Let's move on. We can divide motivation into two different types, known as intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic or internal motivation comes from within the individual. It's a self-desire to gain knowledge. And people with intrinsic motivation engage in tasks for the pleasure that comes from the task itself. Extrinsic or external motivation, on the other hand, makes people engage in tasks for the rewards they get from completing the tasks, not for the pleasure coming from them. You might, for instance, be forced to take a course in order to pass an exam, to be promoted, or to raise your salary. And in this context, a reward can also be to avoid punishment connected to not completing a task. Intrinsic motivation can be sustaining and long-lasting, but it usually takes time to affect behavior. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, makes it easier to quickly motivate people and get them to work towards a goal. But the motivation will only last as long as extrinsic rewards are satisfying enough. In a teaching situation, you should of course always strive to get the students intrinsically motivated. Most corporate learning activities today are initiated by a need for change. It could be a new computer system being implemented, a new security policy, changed parking lot regulations, or basically anything. How many of you have taken part in a training like this? Hands up. Most of us, I guess. And how many of you can honestly say that it was intrinsic motivation that made you take the course? None. I've been there many times as well. We all know that change is constant. So there will be a never-ending need for workforce training. And these courses are normally an important step in the change process. So you might think that some effort is made to make sure that they are well received by the workforce. But most of the time, this is what we get. You have mail. New mandatory e-learning on the security policy. Please finalize by Friday. Are there any parents in the audience? Yeah, I thought so. Then you know how well things like, you must go to bed, or if you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding, works when you try to control your kids. It's the same with adults, but worse, since we are much more creative when coming up with excuses. As a manager, you may understand the importance of the course and how it fits in your big strategical change process, but your employees don't. So that's why you have to prepare them by applying some change management techniques. There are many models for change. One of the most popular is the Kubler-Ross change curve, originally presented as the 5 stages of grief. When it was first published in 1969, it was a model consisting of the different stages of emotions experienced by people who are soon going to die. And these 5 stages were denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Let me give you an example of how the model works. Imagine one of the chilly winter mornings, soon to come here in Sweden. It's dark and there's a thin layer of frost on the ground. I'm late for work and I have to rush to my car parked outside. When I turn the key in the ignition, nothing happens. And I realize that the battery is dead. What I then go through is a demonstration of different stages in the model. My first reaction is shock and denial. What? I can't believe this is happening to me now when I'm already running late. I try to start the car again, and again, and again, but it's no use. Then anger and frustration follows. I realize that the car can't be started, and I begin to feel angry and very mad at the situation. Words my mother didn't teach me start coming out from my mouth. And even though I know it won't help, I then start bargaining, asking the car to start just for once, please. I promise I will keep it maintained and get the battery charged as soon as possible. I might even promise to wash it by hand. But then I reach depression. Negative thoughts start rushing through my mind, and I begin to feel depressed, sad, and miserable. I fear my job will be taken away, and I see no way out of the situation. Everything is hopeless. But then, after a while, I reach acceptance. I finally start to get hold of the situation and begin to figure out what to do next. I might start to check the schedule for public transportation or consider to grab a cab and decide to deal with their battery later on. So after this first release, the model has been found valid in many other cases. For example, when it comes to change. The change edition of the Kubler-Ross model uses a bit different naming of the stages, as you can see here. In a business context, this emotional roller coaster could be caused by the implementation of a new computer system. No, I don't have time to learn a new system again. I'll stick to the old one. It works perfectly fine for me. Besides, I spent hours of creating templates, and I know every keyboard shortcut by hand. Do you know the feeling? Well, regardless of your opinion, change will happen. The new system will be implemented, but don't you worry. The almighty management has secured that extensive training is part of the package to get everyone up and running quickly. Right. So, looking at the model, where do you think the precious learning package hits the users? Yep, we find it here. Starting when people are feeling really miserable. So no wonder it can be hard to find motivated learners. But lucky us, in change management, there are ways to reduce the amplitude of the change curve. And the first step is to create awareness that the change is coming. And this must happen here, while we're still on or above status quo. This is when reality of the change hits and people may be in shock or denial. Here people need information to understand what's happening. So make sure to communicate often, but don't give too much information at a time. Instead, make sure that people know where to go if they want more. Now, when we have lit the spark of curiosity in our frustrated users, we need to intensify communication to create an interest in the coming change and hopefully a desire to learn. Here people start to react by feeling concern, anger, or fear. They may resist the change actively or passively. And this is a critical stage in the change process. So it needs planning and preparation. You need to carefully consider the impacts and objections people might have and address them with clear communication. Your objective during this stage is to turn a frustration, fear, and anger into a slow-growing interest. The third stage, depression, is the turning point in the change process. Here it's important to encourage people to start testing and exploring what the change actually means for them. This is the time to focus on increasing motivation. Since this time often is where training starts, you should use motivational design to help create learning that is appealing to people, and the end will get them well trained. But more about that later. The learning phase can be difficult to many employees. Most now start to realize that there are no way out of this. And it's important to understand that people handle change and learning something new in many different ways. So the more exciting you can make the training, the better chance you have to get people to move along in the process. During the learning phase, it's important to provide plenty of support to remove any obstacles that may prevent learning. Then we can reach the last stage, the one we have been waiting for. People finally begin to embrace the change and accept the situation. They understand the importance of the change and resign towards it. And to reinforce the effect, you should provide different means of knowledge sharing here. You can, for example, use online communities, user groups, super user support, and so on. And this will help people who are lagging a bit behind to catch up faster and get everybody integrated with the change. If we manage to handle the change process like this, magic will happen. As you can see, the change curve is now kept much closer to the status quo line. And this means that people will be more happy and more productive during the change. And the best part, since we're talking about learning, look what happens with the learning block. Now when we reach the learning phase, we will reach much less resistance. Beautiful, isn't it? Recently, I was part of a project where we used this setup in close cooperation between the communication and the learning teams. The customer is a global corporation implementing a new business system that will affect a couple of thousand users. And to give you an idea of the time frame, our first awareness initiatives were launched about half a year before the first training was planned to start. And examples of these initiatives were brief notes on the intranet, some present by project members in team meetings, and a short video teaser. And this is the video we showed our users in November last year to start creating awareness.
From purchase development here. You know what? We've got something great cooking. I can't wait until February to show you more. So stay tuned.
Maybe not the kind of communication you would expect about a new computer system. The guy Henrik at the end, by the way, is a very busy man. To get him on film, our communication manager had to hunt him down between two meetings and more or less push him up against the wall to record him with our mobile phone. SSCM stands for Supplier, Sourcing and Contract Management. But we don't mention that in the video to keep an element of mystery. Okay, the previous one was fun, so let's try one more. I'm good luck with my links today. Whoa. Yeah, but. So you know the drill. It's a new code this time. All day. We have some various views of change here, that's great. But change is important. Remember, we cannot become what we want to be by remaining what we are. Okay, back to the product of my customer. I can't tell you the name, but it's a big company in the furniture and meatball business. About 3 months after the trailer, we released the next video with more information about the project. It was still a bit mysterious to create interest and curiosity. At the same time, the articles on the internet became longer and more frequent, and project members started to turn up more often at team meetings. So here's the next video we showed, and this was February this spring.
Hey, this is Henrik from Purchase Development. Now it's time to find out more about SSCM. It will be an important tool for you and your suppliers to work together more easily. So let's find out how.
This is Victor. He works at purchasing, and like many of us, often struggles with his daily work. Mapping new suppliers, leading sourcing events and searching for information in different places. Victor, you need SSCM. SSCM brings supplier information, sourcing, price management and contract management into one solution. Today, your everyday work is a bit like a busy kitchen with too many pots on the boil. You have to juggle between different IT tools to view your supplier status, track supplier history and approve contracts. Isn't that right, Victor? SSCM lets you focus on one solution, one hearty soup and a single source of truth for your valuable data. And you know the days when you are so up for the game, all prepared and ready to go. But today, with purchasing and suppliers communicating via different systems, the information flow is slow and you are left waiting. SSCM improves the way purchasing co-workers and suppliers collaborate, speeding up processes and giving you the insights you need to take the right action at the right time. Today, with information scattered over different systems, there is a higher risk of losing valuable data. Those days are over. Using cloud technology, SSCM keeps your information safe. Stay cool, it's in the tool. In the fast-moving purchasing world, we need tools that can be quickly and easily adapted to the business needs. SSCM is a flexible, module-based solution that's quick and easy to adapt. It's a tool for growth, keeping us ahead of the game. SSCM, because great people deserve great tools.
Note that even Henrik now have realized the importance of communication and committed to be filmed in a real studio. I left the project just before training started, so I haven't got any metrics. But my feeling was that they were very curious and eager to get their hands on the new system. So communication is obviously important to build awareness and to reduce the negative effects of change. And to get even better results, one of the most effective ways is to identify early adopters in the organization and use them as ambassadors to convince the rest of the organization. This graph is called the diffusion of innovations. And it's a theory that explains how, why, and at what rate new ideas and technologies are spread. Here on the left end of the curve, we find that people always turn up with gizmos we didn't even know existed. And over here at the right end, we find our parents. So, how do we find our early adopters then? Well, the people we're looking for are often formal or informal leaders whose opinions are well respected within the organization. They are the people who give relevant feedback to your awareness post on the internet. You will find them on lists of people volunteering to be functional experts. And if you're super users for other applications, you can probably use the same people. And once identified, make sure you give your early adopters lots of love. Ask them for input. Invite them to early user tests. Let them do beta testing. Give them t-shirts. Whatever makes them happy. Be creative. Properly treated, the early adopters then spread the word among the colleagues in the organization. And then we have to create awareness among the people on the right half of the diagram. And you will meet less resistance once training is started. I talk a lot about learning today. Maybe not surprised given the title of the session. But since many day-to-day meeting presentations can be seen as some kind of learning, most of the methods I discuss here today can be used there as well. Especially the needles are effective, I promise you. So if you've done everything right so far, you now have well-prepared users who can't wait to start taking the legendary course they heard so much about. Don't ruin it. with a bad learning experience that disappoints them. Learning developers like myself are generally quite good at instructional design. We can define relevant learning objectives and build courses that use different pedagogical methods to lead students towards them. We have several instructional design models to help us, for example, ADDIE, which is one of the most widely used. But these instructional design models do not normally address motivation, however. So that's why we need to work with motivational design in parallel with instructional design. This law, first published in 1908, dictates that performance increases with arousal, but only up to a certain point. When the levels of arousal become too high, performance decreases. And this means that using entertainments in a wrong way or too frequently can actually have negative impacts on the student's motivation, since they begin to work only for the extrinsic rewards. Too much bells and whistles will make our learners behave like squirrels in a nut factory, and we don't want that, believe me. And one common mistake people make is not to adapt the amount of stimulation to the student's level of motivation. You should, for example, never try to motivate students that are already motivated. So motivational design is the art of making learning appealing without becoming too entertaining. Successful learning designers consider motivational gaps. They find the gaps in their learner's motivation and try to take care of those gaps with their design. So motivational design is actually about identifying motivational objectives and then addressing them to get changes in motivation. And when writing motivational objectives, there is a distinction between closing motivational gaps and maintaining motivation. In some settings, there will be specific motivational problems that need attention. For example, if your audience is not likely to see the relevance of a given topic, then you have a motivational gap and may want to write a motivational objective that takes care of that one. In other situations, there might be no motivational problems, but you will still have to maintain motivation during the course to avoid that your students are getting bored. And then to be effective, your motivational tactics have to support the learning goals. Sometimes motivational features can be entertaining or even fun, but unless they support the learners in reaching the goal, they do not promote learning at all. So, like with instructional design, there are models to help us with motivational design. And the best known of these is probably the ARCS model for motivational design, first introduced by John Kerry in 1979. And since then, there has been research in this subject for more than 30 years. The book was published in 2010, and it contains everything you wanted to know about the ARCS model, but were too afraid to ask. And if you're serious about motivational design, and you should be, read it. It has plenty of real-world examples and ready-to-use worksheets. So motivational design is a powerful aid for helping us as learning designers to create courses that will keep up learner engagement. So the ARCS model contains 4 elements of motivation, and they are attention, relevance, confidence, and the last one is satisfaction. And you can apply these elements in many ways. For example, gamification of learning content. Use some of the ARCS principles, such as offering challenges, providing feedback, and including ways to level up. Learner-centered design approaches also follow some of the ARCS principles by offering learners multiple ways of consuming learning and control over some aspects of their learning. But to successfully apply the ARCS model, you must first analyze the target audience. Who are the learners? What are their goals? What gets them going? What will stop them from learning? And so on. When you know your learners, you can identify gaps in motivation and find out in which of the 4 areas you need to put your efforts. So let's take a closer look to the 4 elements of the Ox model. In many cases, a course is a result of goals and learning objectives that are defined by a manager or forced by law or other regulations. So here the learners might lack intrinsic motivation to take the course. So engage in them can be a challenge. Designers can engage these learners, for example, by creating a learning game or by drawing them into a story. Elements of surprise are always effective. And by active participation, learners get more engaged in the learning process, and that makes them more likely to be interested in the content. Humor should be used with caution, but some light-hearted fun elements can help you to get the attention of your learners. Another technique to grab learners' attention is to present statements or facts that may be in conflict with what the learner knows or believes is true. And always presenting information in the same way is boring. So you can also grab learners' attention by using a variety of different media. Then learners tend to get more motivated if they believe that what they learn has a practical application in real life. So by using real-world examples, you will grab their attention and make them want to know more. If the motivational gaps come from a lack of interest or from not buying the goals, you might need to center your motivational tactics on showing relevance. How will the new information or skill help your learners to solve a familiar problem or make their lives easier? A relevance-based motivational gap can also be caused by lack of understanding the bigger picture. And this means you need to show how the skill has been applied by others in the organization, or to convince learners that the knowledge will be useful in the future. To let learners establish links between the new information presented and what they already know from previous experiences is a very powerful motivational strategy. The fact that they believe that learning is successful and not a waste of time keeps them, of course, engaged. So this is considered to be one of the top motivational factors. Adult learners usually attend the course when they actually need it, or when someone else, like their manager, says they need it. So if I see a direct connection of how the course they attend will give them present worth with new skills, motivation will increase. Also, how learners believe the course will help them in the future is important. So that should be communicated from the very beginning. By presenting role models of other people who successfully applied the particular piece of knowledge or skill presented will help motivate learners to find the course useful. And finally, to give learners different choices is another factor that increases motivation. Adult learners often know exactly what they want to learn, and they have preferences on how they want to learn when it comes to media or other methods. So if possible, let them choose. It's important that your learners feel confident that they can apply the new skills after the course. So set expectations by presenting clear goals and provide guidance that helps them to reach the goals and follow their progress during the way without becoming overwhelmed. If too much complex information is thrown at poorly prepared users, the result will be learners that are convinced that they will never be able to do whatever is being taught. Encourage learners to take small steps and show them their progress after each step. This will help them to believe in themselves, and that increases motivation. And by communicating objectives and prerequisites, learners will know in advance what they have to achieve. To realize that they can reach the goals of a course is another motivating factor. So it's important for them to know how they are going to be evaluated at the end. Providing feedback is, of course, an important key to learner motivation. Without feedback, learners will be confused, since they cannot tell how they are going. And again, to let learners have some degree of control over the content and learning process. Let's give them a sense that they are responsible for their own learning, and that increases motivation. Learners gain satisfaction from learning when they are able to apply their new skills, solve problems, and earn feedback, praise, and rewards that are meaningful to them. These rewards can range from a sense of accomplishment of earning a badge or certificate to reinforcement from management or colleagues. This increases the level of satisfaction from the course, since learners believe that the feeling that they have gained some kind of achievement and got recognition of their efforts. And remember, it doesn't have to be physical rewards. If we have managed to increase the students' intrinsic motivation, then passing the course and learning something new might be a reward enough. And again, maybe most important, learner satisfaction comes from meaningful achievements. So to be sure to provide learners with opportunities to get immediate application for their new skills in real-world settings after they return from the course. By this, they will get inner satisfaction as they will find worthwhile the time, money and effort they put in the learning activity. And of course, we need to avoid negative influences and focus on the positive outcomes. Let's return to my sleepy soldiers. My little stunt with the auto-injector surely made them pay attention to me. But the truth is, they were already highly motivated. Remember, this was during the Cold War. Most young men in Sweden did military service, as their fathers and grandfathers had done before them. Sweden was neutral, squeezed between NATO in the west and the Warsaw Pact in the east. And to be trustworthy as a neutral country, we had to have strong armed forces. In case of war, we could mobilize almost 10% of our population to defend ourselves. And despite Sweden being at place 90 at the world population list, we had the fourth largest air force in the world during the peak of the Cold War. So military training was a natural part of our community. And not to forget, the skills I learned in this particular lesson about the auto-injector could actually mean a difference between life and death for them. So in this context, everybody understood the bigger picture. And for the majority of the conscripts, motivation was not an issue. For me and the other instructors, this high level of motivation meant that most of the time we had a learning curve that reminded of the flat red change curve I showed earlier. But we didn't have to use change management to get it that way. And since general motivation wasn't a problem with my soldiers, what I actually did on my lesson that morning was to identify a motivational gap. I realized that the early morning probably would mean that my soldiers were tired, and that might lead to a lack of focus. So to prevent that, I used some motivational tactics to capture their attention. Do you remember which motivational measure I used? Well, I chose to scare the living daylights out of them. So it was the element of surprise was always effective. This was more than 30 years ago, and one of my first teaching experiences. So to be honest, I had no idea of how to work with motivational design. Actually, it was pure luck that my lesson happened to turn out as well as it did. But when I look back now with my motivational glasses on, I can understand why it was successful. From placing the training in context in the shade of the Cold War, everyone got the bigger picture, down to using motivational tactics to boost attention. All the necessary elements were in place, so I couldn't possibly fail. Before I finish, I want to give you a few important things to remember. Change is constant. Again, it was known already by the ancient Greeks that the one thing in life you can be sure of is that it won't be the same tomorrow, next week, or in the year 2525. And since learning is change, and change is constant, learning designers like myself will never run out of work. Happy times. It also means that we need to start to look at learning in context from a change perspective, and not as isolated islands in an ocean of opportunities. And finally, love your learners. If you love someone, you care about that person. And if you care about someone, you will do anything to make that person feel great. And that, my friends, is actually my main message today. To win the hearts and minds of your learners, you must first open up your own to fully understand your audience. Thank you very much.